So as I was saying with masks, particularly with the N95 mask, is that you need to secure it across your face, and a lot of people don't do that right. Your dust masks, I mean, they reduce the amount of moisture in the air, but really what happens is that the people who really should wear the masks are the people that are actively sniffling, coughing, etc., so that they can keep the fluids in their environment and away from everybody else. And one article I saw said that the virus can last for maybe 96 hours on a surface, but I can't remember if that was actually the best number that I saw while I was reading. So, so relative to masks, unless unless you get sick at that point in time, you really do want a mask. But hoarding up on them is not going to do you any good. So, in the meantime, things to do is here in Texas, we're always ready to stock up for a hurricane, and you kind of want to do a similar thing. There shouldn't be any really big disruption, but it's always good to have a few extra batteries and some things that you need just in case there's a problem going to the store and they don't have something, that kind of thing. So I've got a link to your emergency kit and with supplies that you should have, and just, basic kind of emergency supplies. Now, because this is a flu and some people will get sick with flu-like symptoms, having a flu kit is a good idea as well. One thing that is worth being aware of is that a lot of people, because of the way that our economy is structured, will continue to go to work sick because they don't get paid for time off. And then also they will continue to go to work sick because they don't have any health care. So, so that's something to be aware of, and this is particularly prevalent in the food industry. So if you go to a restaurant, don't assume that the people working there are going to be on top of all these kind of things to prevent the spread of the flu, because basically they really don't have any other choice. So just FYI, keep that in mind. Next, I'm going to talk about those who are most at risk are the elderly and those with underlying medical conditions. And so I've got a link here and you can read more about it. And the percentages was, one article I saw said that no children have died from this illness. And then the other article that I read, it kind of varied, is that the older people got, then the more that this was a risk to them. Okay. And so the other thing that's important to understand relative to this virus is that there's a rate to it. So I'm aware that President Donald Trump said that it would just go away in April. And there's something to be leery about relative to this kind of an assurance, which is that in May, by April, a lot of the cases had disappeared back in 1918, but then come September 1918, that's whenever it was so traumatic that it just kind of like stuck in our history books that this horrible disease had killed so many people. And it's also called the Spanish flu, but I call it the 1918 flu. Okay, so the other thing to understand relative to this is where I link into this article, which is its transmission rate. So for every person that's sick, they tend to transmit it to a little over 2 people. And then there's a useful chart here, which is that the death rate is similar to the Spanish flu. And so this is your age difference. So here would be, younger people, and then goes to older people. But I also saw that I don't know exactly if this number is accurate, but it really did exceed 2% for older people. So anyways, now the issue here to think about whenever you look at this is modern technology. So back in the Spanish flu, we didn't have ventilators, and that's what everyone's talking about right now, is ventilators, because relative to the people that were sick enough that they had to go to the hospital, which is a certain percentage, and off the top of my head I can't remember what it is, but 20% of them had to be put onto serious medical intervention. And the issue is that if you look at the US population, you say, okay, maybe 10% of them get sick, and then a certain percentage of those need to go to the hospital, which one article I read said that it was 40% of those that got sick had to go to the hospital. Like, most people don't even notice, but of the people that do notice that they got sick, they have to go, 40% of them have to go to the hospital, and then 20% of those end up having to be on ventilators. And so there are a lot of numbers kind of floating around, but in any case, no matter how you break down the numbers, there are not enough beds in the hospital. Well, if there are not enough beds in the hospital, there's not enough equipment. And so that's where the issue really is coming down. It's not masks, it's ventilators at the hospital, it's beds at the hospital, it's being able to access the hospital. So that is, that's a real sticking point right now. And anyways, so be aware of all these things, and I will say that if you are in a contained space and you're around somebody, and if they do like sniffling and coughing, and that it would be worthwhile to wear a mask, even though there's issues with doing that. If you're trapped with somebody in a contained space and they're coughing, that's probably when it is a good idea to wear a mask. So even though in general it doesn't really help you, that's the one situation where it would. But if you are sick and sniffling, absolutely wear a mask, because you don't want to spread it around. Okay. All right. Well, good luck to everybody, and good luck with the primary, and I'll have another video ready here in a few weeks.